If you don't carry these things, you're wrong. Hello friends, welcome back. I am Jason and this is JJ.
Yo!
We are talking about the 5 C's today. The 5 C's is nothing more than an easy way to remember 5 very important items that you should never be without.
So the first thing we got to talk about is cutting tools. And I prefer having a good belt knife, one that I can cut through wood if I need to, especially if I've got to split it open and get to the dry stuff, you know. But I also like having a knife that goes in my pocket as well for doing small tasks like trap triggers, whittling away, etc. Even kitchen prep, for example. A cutting tool is not just limited to a knife. I mean, I also like to have a saw as well. This is my Opinel saw that goes in my pocket as well. It acts as the companion to my pocket knife. Now, just because you have them in your pocket doesn't mean that you can't have them in something like, say, a backpack, which is, in fact, a container, right? So maybe you're up north and you need to cut some really big wood, and this would be, let's say, safer than using an axe.
You said big wood.
Big wood.
All right, carry on. Okay.
So sometimes having a saw like this is actually safer than having an axe, for example, because we can safely cut the wood in half. Now, when I was younger, the most important cutting tool that you could ever have was, in fact, an axe. I mean, just think about how much you can do with one of these. And another tool that we always had around was a machete, a larger tool, because you can do so much work with one of these. And the kukri, in fact, has been around for 2,500 years, and that's saying something. And if you think about it, our earliest ancestors had to have cutting tools. Of course, it was a rock, for example. But one thing that we know for certain is that is the most important tool that was ever made in our history to help us survive as a species. Hey, if you're honey smack digging the content, then make sure you leave us a snide remark in the comment section, like, share, and subscribe.
Arguably, the most important skill that we can possess, especially in a remote wilderness setting, is going to be the ability to create fire. And now there's all sorts of ways to do that, from rubbing 2 sticks together with a bow drill and hand drill and banging rocks on a piece of steel, all sorts of ways to do it. But the point is that you need to carry the most reliable, easiest, most productive, most modern way to start a fire imaginable. Our ancestors did the same thing. At the time, maybe a bow drill was the most modern, most reliable means of starting a fire, but now we have so many more options, and it's absolutely ridiculous, unless you're challenging yourself for whatever reason, to go into a remote place without something like that. There's lots of different ways to go about this. Everything from a modern ferrocerium rod like this to my preferred means of starting a fire is a Bic lighter like that with some duct tape wrapped around it. Why duct tape? Because duct tape is flammable. It has lots of other uses, right? Every good redneck knows that, but it's flammable and it can help you get a fire going, especially if you're in wet conditions like where we live pretty much all the time. Along with that, different fire starters such as ferro rods and lighters, carrying some sort of tinder, something that's easily combustible that's going to help you get your fire going, is so smart. You should definitely do that, because don't just assume that you're going to be able to find good quality tinder out in the wild. You may be walking by it everywhere and you're like, I'll get that 10 miles down the trail, no big deal. And then you show up at camp and there's nothing to be had. So get it while you can, or bring it along with you. One of my favorites, the old standby, is just Vaseline and cotton balls. This one is a baby soft scent, baby love. So you know it's good. So you know it's good.
It's good, baby.
This one is one of my favorites now. If you haven't seen these, this is the same thing that they make guitar picks out of. I forget what the material is called. Celluloid. That's what this is made out of, and it is ridiculously flammable. I will show you a demonstration. Watch this. So I'm just going to scrape off a little bit. Not much. It doesn't take much. Scrape off a tiny little bit of that, or light it with your lighter. That's fine too. But if you're using a ferro rod, all you need is a tiny little bit like that. And then this thing burns like crazy. Look at that. I think this is my new favorite fire starter. It's amazing how well that burns. It's an inferno. Look at that. And then you can just use what you need and then take the card out, use the little pieces of it, but you don't have to use the whole thing unless you choose to. But if that doesn't get your fire going, you're in trouble. But this is also one of my favorites. This is fat wood or pitch pine or lighter knot. Lots of different names for it. Everybody else thinks everybody else is wrong in what the name of this is, but it's amazing. Smells like turpentine, smells like pine sap. It is amazing stuff, and it's really, really flammable, and that's a really good natural source of tinder right there.
Now the next C is cordage, and that's one of the things that's actually hardest to make out in the woods because it's dependent on, number one, your knowledge, and number two, being able to find the resources and then having the experience to actually make it happen.
And the time.
And the time that it takes to actually make it happen. I cannot stand that.
How long would it take you to make that much?
I would have to hire the indigenous peoples of wherever and create my own sweatshop. That's what I would have to do. But one thing for sure, if you're a little bit older, something that I'm starting to experience at my age is getting carpal tunnels with your hands. Because my entire life I have used my hands for making stuff. And so making something that is really this well produced in nature is really hard to do. And after a while, it actually hurts my hands. So there's really no excuse not to have a hank of something like paracord, for example, that you can literally just slip in your pocket and save yourself so much time. Now, besides having something like paracord in your pocket, for example, you do have other choices. Like, for example, here is 25 feet of Technora cord, which has a test of 400 pounds, if I remember correctly. And then you can also go to bank line, which is another really common choice to have as well. Now, I don't typically carry a lot of natural cordage with me, but one advantage to having natural cordage is that you can use it as a tinder source as well.
The rooster, I've got two roosters, which I did not purchase, by the way. They just showed up here one day.
Really? And they just showed up?
Yeah, they just showed up. I started hearing cock-a-doodle-doo in the woods, and I thought, what?
You're like the cock whisperer.
Yeah. Yes, it would appear so. But anyway, they showed up, and now I'm the owner of two roosters. And every time you hit record on the camera, they just go
flaming. Just think of all the uses, things that you can do with cordage, right? Like making your traps, making a bow, tying stuff together, pulling stuff out of the woods, making your shelter. Think about all the things you can do as far as first aid goes.
Yeah, our entire world used to be held together with cordage. Before the nails, before the glues, before all the stuff that you think that we build things with today, it was wooden pegs and cordage, rope of some sort made of natural materials.
Including sinew.
Yeah, exactly right. Like bowstrings were made of sinew,
exactly.
animal sinew. So yeah, it's pretty amazing to look back at that and just consider all the effort and time that went into it. Like, for example, some of the native peoples that lived in coastal areas made huge nets. Giant nets. Oh
my God.
People that lived in Florida, for example, made giant nets out of the palm fibers, the fuzzy stuff that grows at the base of the palm trees. And I can't imagine how long it would take multiple people working on that to build something like that. So it makes you appreciate so much more having this right here. I mean, this is incredibly strong compared to that, and it's cheap, easy.
Yeah, that's 1,200 pound test right there.
Yeah,
1,200 pounds.
Yeah, there's no reason to not have it. Cover is a big one. Having some sort of way to protect you from the elements is such a big deal. And it's the first line of defense is always going to be your clothing. I mean, that's cover in and of itself. And if you do nothing else, just dress appropriately, and chances are you're probably going to be fine. Having a hat on your head to protect you from the sun, or a warm cap to keep your ears warm in the wintertime, some sort of clothing to cover your arms and keep you from getting bit by mosquitoes, all that kind of stuff is super important. But in addition to that, having some sort of external, bigger type shelter is going to be really, really helpful, especially in really bad weather. So I prefer, this is one of my top choices, I almost always have a poncho with me if I am going to really anywhere, but especially if I'm going into some sort of woodland, wilderness type environment. I've always got a poncho because not only is it rain gear that I could just throw on my body and sit up against a tree, I can make myself a pretty awesome one-man shelter out of this. Now, stepping it up in size, especially if you've got more than one person in your group, is a tarp such as this one. This is a 3x3 meter, if you're into the metric system. 3x3 meter tarp that gives you a whole lot of real estate. I've spent a lot of days under a tarp of this size, and it's very, very comfortable by myself and with other people as well. But it's more than enough room to get underneath it and give yourself room for your gear, your equipment, firewood, all the stuff that you need you can put under a tarp of this size. I have a love-hate relationship with these. This is a Mylar blanket, and this is actually one of the better ones. It's really tough. It's actually hard to tear this one. It stretches quite a bit before it tears. Even though they're fairly fragile, look how small that is. I can put that in my pocket. I can put that in the back pocket of my skinny jeans and wear that around all the time, and you won't even know it's there. And I've got some sort of shelter on me, some sort of cover that's gonna keep me protected from the elements no matter what. And I tell you what, I've got some skills. I've been hanging out in the woods my entire life. I've done the bushcraft, the survival things. I have spent the night under lean-to shelters a lot. Probably more than most people, probably more than anybody I know. However, they will never be as watertight, regardless of your skill, as this right here. This will keep the rain off of you if you rig it up correctly and you're careful with it. You don't put big holes in it. It will keep the rain off you so much better than any debris hut that you're gonna build.
And seriously, when was the last time you went out and actually built a primitive shelter?
It takes forever.
It takes forever.
Yeah.
So unless you've actually done it, we're calling out the keyboard commandos.
Yeah, in our area, I know for example, this area right here, minimum, if you want a one-man shelter that's gonna keep you reasonably dry, you're looking at 4 hours. And that's getting after it. And we can't always assume that there's going to be some sort of shelter just naturally lying out there, the cave that we all fantasize
It's all
about
in the
sleeping
SAS survival manual.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, maybe you might get lucky and there might be this perfect shelter with this overhang that's protecting you from the elements and it's flat and soft and cushy. But chances are almost certainly that's not going to be the case.
No, I can tell you from 14 years in the field in search and rescue that people have always been looking for that classic shelter, the cave, the hollowed out log, the whatever it is that they think that they're going to find, and they never end up finding it.
Yeah,
ever.
and then instead of hunkering down and building yourself some sort of makeshift shelter, setting up your tarp or whatever it is,
Utilizing whatever resources
you spend
are
forever
there.
looking for the perfect shelter.
Yeah.
There is no perfect shelter, most likely.
And 9 times out of 10, most of the people aren't smart enough to actually shelter in place. They end up making us chase them around as well.
Yeah, just
When if they had just stayed there and
Yeah.
hugged a tree, you know,
Yeah.
that's what we tell the kids, but really we should be telling the adults that.
Yeah.
Like, shelter in place. If you get lost like that, people tend to get even more lost, and they're walking in circles out there, and it just takes that much longer for a rescue team to come in and find you.
Right. Last but not least is some sort of container, right? And a container can be everything from a metal cup like this one with a lid to something much more modern like this Grail water filter right here that is not only a filter to make the water clean and safe to drink, but it's also a container that you can carry the water in.
And something that, for me as a survival instructor, I mean, it's really nice to have something like this, a Grail, a plastic container, but what if it fails, right? You got to have some kind of backup to go with it, right? What if you've got to actually boil the water, which is why I always carry a stainless steel cup with me as well.
This is my favorite one right here. This is a Stanley cook pot. I always take off. It comes with a little plastic tabby-doo here. For some reason, I guess they're not anticipating people putting it in a fire like me, so I always replace it with some sort of metal ring like that one right there. I like it a lot because it's got a lid and you can keep debris out of your cup while you're boiling water if you're into keeping your water nice and clean. And it's got this locking, snapping handle here that makes it really easy to pull in and out of the fire. When it comes to containers, we're not just talking about means of carrying water. We're also talking about your other supplies or anything that you might gather, edibles, wild edibles and fruits and berries and stuff like that. Having some sort of pack that's going to carry your shelter, all the tools that you may require in a wild place is super important. Our oldest ancestors have devised some sort of means of carrying their equipment in some sort of bag-like thing. If it was made from animal skins or woven fibers, whatever it may be. Even Utsi, the 5,000-year-old man they found in the ice, had a pack frame. The rest of his pack was pretty much gone, but he had a pack frame that he was carrying his supplies in. So something like this simple drawstring pack right here that you could roll up and put in your pocket is really great. This is my favorite day pack right here. And then everything all the way up to a big type expedition type pack, depending on the terrain that you're traveling through, how long you're going to be gone, dictates the size that you might need.
And containers aren't just limited to, say, backpacks. I mean, what about having, say, a dump pouch, for example, or utilizing your pockets, or even putting stuff inside of your hat so that you can carry stuff with you?
Now, I like practicing the primitive skills just as anybody else. I like rubbing the sticks together. I like making the crafts out of natural materials. I really enjoy having those skills, and I think that they are definitely a worthwhile venture. I think it's important to keep passing on those skills to the next generation.
Absolutely. If anything, giving them perspective, and I enjoy watching other people make it so they realize the importance of being prepared.
Exactly, exactly. I have boiled water in this container right here. Several years back, this has been collecting dust on my shelf. But I was able to stone boil, build a fire primitively, stone boil water in this pine bark bowl right here. And I was able to purify my water, cook a meal, whatever it is.
Yep.
But the amount of energy and time that it takes.
Not to mention if you screw it up.
Yes.
On top of that,
yeah.
it takes a lot of patience.
Absolutely.
A lot of experience, yeah.
Absolutely. So the amount of time it takes to do something like this when you could just bring a metal container and a way to start a fire.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at a full day's effort to collect the materials to start the fire in a primitive means and stone boil water. That's all day.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say, you know, I can head out into the woods with just a knife, and I can make a burn bowl, and I can do all that and boil the water. Yeah, you can. You sure can.
Absolutely can.
Yeah, definitely, it's possible. But
You're
man,
probably going to starve before you actually get everything
or die
made.
of dehydration. Yeah.
You can also do the classic baby diaper trick with leaves so that you can gather berries, or even get a drink of water.
Yes.
Like if you found a natural spring
Yeah,
or something like that.
Scoop water out of
Scooping
the
water
a seep well of some sort. Yeah, so you don't mess up the bottom.
Yeah, you got a shallow water source and you
Yeah.
got to dip some out or whatever. And there's all kinds of different, you know, like I've made birch bark containers, right? And then you've made the pine pitch glue to go with it, you know, to seal it all together.
Yeah.
What we're trying to tell you is that this stuff takes a lot of patience, and you've got to find the right resources, and you've got to have the experience to make it happen. And so do you have that much time? Because I think there's a lot to be said about convenience when you're out in the woods. I mean, just simply having that stainless steel Stanley cup that you have, I mean, how easy is that to go and gather water now and boil it if you have to purify the water?
It's a no-brainer.
Right? No brainer.
Piece of cake.
Be smart. And if you think about it, our earliest ancestors, they actually took just pieces of cloth that they would manufacture or leather, and they would actually make containers out of that. When I was in the field as a SAR-1, I used to use a twin cotton sheet all the time. Just think about all the stuff that you can do with a twin cotton sheet.
Yep. I've used a shemagh for a fanny pack type
Yes,
carry. That works really
excellent,
good. It's
yeah.
actually really comfortable to carry that way, and it's multi-purpose, so it's not just a bag.
Yep.
It's a piece of cloth that you can use for a bandage, a
Multi-tool.
makeshift tourniquet.
So many things.
Yeah, imagine
Right,
that.
We're
So-
not going to say 100, but there are multiple.
Probably might be 100. Yeah, yeah. There's
I guess
a lot.
we could make them.
Yeah, there's absolutely a ton of things that you could do with something like that. Pictures, old pictures of Civil War soldiers that used their wool blankets rolled up and
yeah,
carried
it's
across,
cots
carried
as
across
well,
their shoulder.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, our army-
I'm not sure who first coined the 5 C's.
It was actually first seen in the U.S. Army Survival Manual, the 5 C's of survivability.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so yeah, so that's where it comes from, but it's been done throughout history. Regardless of what you call the things, those items are the most difficult to produce, the most time-consuming to produce, and probably the easiest to carry. I really do appreciate you watching. Make sure you're leaving a comment for us. Tell us what you think about the 5 C's. What are your 5 C's? That would be really, really great. What's your version of the 5 C's? Leave a comment, hit that thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and we can't wait to see you on the next one.